97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher, powered by InsideTheBirds.com.
We expect to win every time we step on the field. That's just the mindset that we have.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, drops every Monday and Thursday morning. Also got ITB TV, their YouTube channel. Geoff Mosher and Adam Kaplan also get you away for fantasy football with John Hansen, fantasy football guru. Every Monday and Wednesday, Geoff Mosher joins us to talk Eagles football in the NFL. As well, I guess he appears on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Football at 4 being brought to you at PlaySugarHouse.com. Geoff, how you doing today?
I'm good, Josh. Doing really well. It's a weird day. I'm sitting here trying to prepare for the fantasy, I'm trying to prepare for tonight's podcast that Adam and I are going to do, in which we basically each do our 53-man roster prediction. And it's always a difficult exercise. You never really know with some of those fringe players who's going to make it and who's not. But a lot of these injuries that have happened, especially with today's announcement that Will Parks is going to be out week to week. A lot of the injuries at receiver, D-line, it's made it so that it's difficult to project who's going to make the team, because when you have a couple of injuries at a certain position, you have to have guys ready to play week one that maybe you didn't ordinarily have making the team, but you don't want to put these injured guys per se on IR, right, and have them out for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season if you only think they're going to miss 1 or 2 weeks. So it's an interesting balance. It's a difficult one, and Adam and I will go through our 53 men, and we'll have it out on the website tomorrow. Well, it'll drop on the podcast tomorrow morning, and we'll put it on the website as well. And Andrew DeCecco will get his in. But this is a difficult one because of all the injuries.
Is there a specific injury that makes is there a injury at a specific position that it makes it the most difficult for you as you're trying to analyze this roster?
Yeah, well, take wide receiver, for example, right? We know that Alshon Jeffrey is very unlikely to play in the season opener. But as Adam has been saying for a while, his reporting is that he thinks Alshon Jeffrey is going to be on the 53. He's not going to start off on any of the list, because Adam said that there's a chance that this guy can play by week, who knows, in September, maybe even, if not October. So you don't want to put him on a list that's going to have him out for a really long time. So you have no Alshon Jeffrey most likely for the season opener, and you'll have no Jalen Reagor most likely for the season opener. So that's 2 guys. And so who's left, right? Deshaun Jackson is 1, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is 2, Greg Ward is another. So those are 3 healthy receivers, plus the 2 injured receivers I just mentioned. Those 5 are probably going to be on your 53, with only 3 available to play. And so I feel like John Hightower has done enough to make the team. So I want to add him as a 6th, right? But that still only gives me 4 healthy receivers headed into the season opener, one of them in Hightower, who's a rookie, and you just don't know exactly what he's going to be able to give you. So I'm sitting here thinking, I've already got 6 wide receivers on the team because 2 are hurt right now. Do I need to add like a Deontay Burnett or a Josh Perkins who can play receiver and tight end, just to add another one there? And that would give me 7 receivers or potentially 3 or 4 tight ends, which is not what the Eagles really want to do, but the injuries necessitate that. And so if you do that, then you've got to go lighter in other areas.
Is there also a possibility that the Eagles, because we've seen them do this before, they set up the 53-man roster, but they wait to see what other moves are made around the league, and they might make more adjustments to the roster. So even what they announced over the weekend could be partially scrapped because of whatever guy is available, and maybe that's part of the reason why certain guys are maybe kept on or left off the roster.
Yeah, there's no doubt that will definitely be happen. So in some regards, coming out with this 53-man roster projection doesn't matter a little bit, because the roster always changes in the preceding 24 hours after the waiver wire transactions are made, or even, Josh, it can change. For example, my my example of keeping 7 wide receivers because 2 guys are going to be hurt for the season opener, that might change right after the season opener. You may have to keep Deontay Burnett, but then cut him after week 1 or week 2, and then, bring back a guy at a certain area just because now you're healthier at wide receiver. So it always does change, but that doesn't change the fact that when I put my list together here, I'm really stuck on the number 55. I've got 55 players that I think are capable and should make this 53-man roster, and that's even making some difficult decisions already. And I'm trying to figure out who the 3 are that they can kind of shave off here and still be able to be representative against Washington with enough healthy bodies in the season opener. So part of me wonders, Josh, if the what's going to happen that might not be anticipated is that someone does go on IR with a designation to return that maybe we're just not expecting. We know a couple of guys are listed as week to week. If you go on IR with designation to return, I think you have to wait at least 6 weeks before you can get back on the practice field and be activated. That's a long time.
And you mentioned a guy who might start the season but not finish the year. The first thing that comes to my mind is 2018 DeAndre Carter, because he was a part of the game plan for the first couple of weeks, but then as soon as other guys got healthy, he was no longer on the team. So the Eagles do have a history of starting the season with some guys, but then as guys get healthy, they make some not just logistical changes, but overhauls on the roster as well.
Sure, and every team does that, not just the Eagles. You've got to kind of plan for the here and now, but also have your future plan of what moves you're going to make a week or two down the road. So you'll see that a lot. I think a couple of years ago, they started off with a few extra guys on the offensive line, and then once somebody got healthy, then they moved the guy to the practice squad after that. And so, I mean, there already are I would think Brandon Brooks is going to start off on IR, maybe with a chance, maybe with a chance to return. We'll have to see about that. And the same thing for there's somebody else hurt right now whose name I'm not thinking, but these are decisions that they're going to have to make that are not going to be easy.
One injury I want to ask you about, obviously, is Will Parks, because we know that that's going to impact what the Eagles want to do defensively. I think the belief was, from listening to you and Adam on the Inside the Birds podcast, that Will Parks and Jalen Mills, and McLeod will kind of be used in maybe like a 3 safety kind of rotation, because the Eagles, don't want to run a lot of linebackers out there. They like to have a lot of defensive backs on the field in their coverages. So the loss of Will Parks for 4 to 6 weeks as being currently reported, how does that impact what the Eagles might do, not just with the opening week roster, but how their game plan is on the field?
Yeah, that's one of the guys that maybe I'm surmising may have to start off. And, I don't know that the Eagles want to do this, and I don't know. Hamstrings are tricky. They can be less than the time reported. They can be more. We remember with Darren Sproles a few years ago, but they want to play 3 safeties. They have Rodney McLeod. They have Jalen Mills. Kevon Wallace has been a rookie. Haven't heard that he's, I think you've heard Jim Schwartz say many times that safeties and linebackers, rookies, it's the toughest acclimation. Their acclimation, not always ready to play right away, and that's normally. Forget that this year they didn't even have OTA. So what are you expecting from Kevon Wallace? I don't think you can expect him to get on the field right now and know the entire defense, especially in their sub package. There are 3 safeties form nickel and dime formation. So then the next people up are guys like Marcus Epps and Rudy Ford. Now, 2 weeks ago, I'm not sure. I'm thinking Marcus Epps and Rudy Ford are definitely making the team. You're hoping that Will Parks is healthy and that Kevon Wallace has had some great breakthroughs. But now I'm not sure. So you're looking at, are you keeping all 6 of those safeties, McLeod, Mills, Parks, Wallace, Epps, Ford, or is that way too much? So you've got to put Parks on maybe IR with designation to return so that he's not occupying a roster spot. But then that's only if you're really confident that Parks is going to be out that long. It's tough.
It's tough. Also, the other side of this is, can you touch on a little bit also of how they need guys to play special teams? Because I think it's an aspect that gets overlooked a lot of times. People start projecting rosters because people say, well, I like fill in the blank player A, B, C, but then players B and C might not be actually legitimate, contributors on special teams.
Yeah, and I think that, when you talk about people doing their 53 man, and you're like thinking, well, I haven't heard about anything from Marcus Epps or Rudy Ford or Craig James, the cornerback, who we all remember from last year with the pass breakup in the end zone against the Packers, right? When he wasn't even supposed to be in the game. But those are critical special teams players. So even though you haven't heard their name a lot this camp, and you might not assume they're on the team, I would say no, you need these players, and there'll be a few of these guys that get on the 53 man because of what they can do on special teams, but because they have to make the team, then you have to consider who's not making the team. Look at cornerback, all right? I mean, it's not a great position for the Eagles outside of Darius Slay, Avonte Maddox, and Nicole Roby-Coleman, right? So you know those three are going to make it, but then you've got some quote-unquote names that are battling for spots, Sidney Jones being one. Rasul Douglas has been on the team for the last few years. They're battling with Cravon LeBlanc and Craig James for two spots, and Sidney Jones doesn't play special teams. I don't think Rasul Douglas is especially known for his special teams the way Cravon LeBlanc and Craig James are. So if you're going to keep more than three corners, which of course they're going to do, all of a sudden you're starting to say, wait a minute, maybe these guys like Cravon and Craig are going to be more important than guys like Rasul and Sidney. And I don't think a lot of people have that mentality when they're putting a roster together. They kind of focus on the names. Even if the names haven't played well, they're still Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas compared to Cravon LeBlanc, Craig James, or Graylin Arnold, for example.
Geoff Mosher joining us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow me on Twitter at Geoff Mosher NFL. Inside the Birds podcast drops every Monday and Thursday morning, so you know a lot of great Eagles insights are going to be dropping tomorrow morning on the Inside the Birds podcast. You mentioned what Jim Schwartz had to say today, and I think one of the biggest things that stood out to me, Jeff, was the fact that Jim Schwartz was pretty honest about the fact that the lack of preseason games and some of the lack of experience of getting guys on the field to see them could have an impact on the season. And I felt like, Schwartz was maybe saying without saying that you're kind of saying to everybody, hey, don't expect the best football product week one.
I've been saying that for a long, long time, Josh, and I agree with you. I think Jim Schwartz was being very candid. The Eagles have a lot of new players. They have a lot of young players that they brought in. We talked about Kevon Wallace and, Jalen Mills making a transition from corner to a hybrid spot. And, Will Parks bringing him in from a different team and just trying to, and on these linebackers, Davion Taylor, Sean Bradley, they're rookies. And Jim has said many times throughout the offseason that the two most difficult positions to learn on the fly are safety and linebacker. And you look at the Eagles have there, and you see a lot of young names and you see a lot of newcomers. So what he's basically saying is, and I think he made a point to say that every team is dealing with this too, Josh, and that's why your point is valid, is that across the board, not just with the Eagles, but across the board in the NFL, I think you're going to see a little first week one, week two kind of, difficulties, maybe poor tackling, maybe blown coverages, people out of their run keys and run defense. I'm not going to say it's going to be a terrible product, but I think you just have to understand and expect that the altered format here this year is going to manifest on the field, at least early on.
Could that also be interpreted to say that teams that have the most veteran experience with their coaching staffs, like, for example, the Eagles offense, Doug Peterson has been in place for the last 4 years, Jim Schwartz has been in place for the last 4 years, that they're going to have an advantage because there's going to be potentially less communication than some other teams in the first few weeks?
Yes, many people I've spoken to have believed two things. One, the teams that have established head coaches and quarterback, guys who have been there for a few years, much like you see with Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz and even Jim Schwartz's defensive coordinator, teams that have that stability are going to have a real advantage over teams that are trying to work in new coaches with new schemes and new language, new verbiage, new acclimation. Teams that have, whether like the Bengals, they have a rookie quarterback, Joe Burrow, that they're trying to get in, or the Giants, who have a new head coach, a new coordinator, new offensive coordinator, right? A lot of free agents the Giants went and signed. It's going to be difficult for those teams. And in fact, a couple of people have said to me that the biggest saving grace for the Dallas Cowboys to be able to compete with the Eagles in the division is the fact that they retained Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator, right? So, because if not, then that would be a whole new staff and scheme potentially. But they've got pretty much the same offense in there. Even with Mike McCarthy taking over, it's really Kellen's offense, and that was the same one from the prior year. So it's good for them as opposed to other teams that had wholesale coaching changes.
Now, you mentioned about some of the coaching changes. One of them is Eagles' first week opponent, the Washington football team. They announced their starting quarterback, Dwayne Haskins, and I just have to assume that probably a lot of Haskins getting a starting job probably has to do with the fact that of this offseason, because maybe there was a little bit more competition with him and Kyle Allen and all the other variables down there in Washington. Maybe if it wasn't the offseason that they had, then maybe he wouldn't be the starting quarterback. It kind of feels like they were just kind of shrugging their shoulders and saying, well, he started last year, so he might as well start this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they want to oversee this and give Dwayne Haskins every opportunity to continue to improve. I mean, I feel like, he didn't face the Eagles the first time around, if I'm correct, but the second time around, he did some decent things. He threw a couple touchdowns. He ran a little bit. I mean, he looked like a capable quarterback, and I think that they want to give him the opportunity with this new staff to be able to impress himself upon them. Apparently he lost weight. Apparently he's exhibited good leadership skills this offseason. Now, a month from the season, if he's just not producing, they have a very interesting situation in having, Kyle Allen, as you mentioned, but also Alex Smith, who's been coming back and who's been a winning quarterback in the NFL for a while. And you wonder, with Washington's defense, at least their front seven be as good as it is, if they're able to kind of hover, stay around 500 for a month or two, maybe a game below, something like that, and ride their defense, but their offense is struggling, would Ron Rivera feel like he has enough time by that point then to turn the keys over to Alex Smith if Alex Smith is healthy, or even make the switch to Kyle, who he had last year with Carolina? But I tend to think that they're going to do with Dwayne Haskins what they did early on with Cam Newton, which is try to really ease him into what they're doing by really relying heavily on a running game. They don't have a great offensive line, but they're going to try to rely on that running game and moving the chain and their defense to take the pressure off the quarterback.
You mentioned the running game. I was actually just looking at their running back depth chart yesterday. I didn't realize that the depth behind Adrian Peterson was Bryce Love and J.D. McKissick, for goodness sake. Like, I feel like I missed the memo on the the Washington football team. I knew I was going to mess it up at some point. The Washington football team having that little depth behind a 30-some-year-old running back.
Yeah, although, obviously they couldn't have anticipated what was going on with Darius Geis. And also, I wouldn't forget about Antonio Gibson. Maybe they have him listed as a wide receiver on their depth chart. I thought he was working out at running back, though, in camp. I'll have to look into it. But we know he was a running back at Memphis, and we know he's a very, very explosive player. And if they can get him on the field as a running back or a third down back or do some things with him, I think they're gonna try to do that. He's a guy that can really do some things with the ball in his hand. I mean, I know how big of a college football fan you are, Josh, so I don't have to tell you what Antonio Gibson was doing last year, to those opponents, but he's a pretty talented kid who just needs some refinement and maybe more opportunities. He may struggle with some pass blocking concepts and things early on, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did try to get the ball in his hands in easy, simplistic ways early on to take advantage of his explosion.
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, and I'm not like Andrew DiCecco where I literally live my entire life around the college film, but I will say from my eyes that I always viewed him more as an offensive weapon than specifically a running back or a wide receiver, and you kind of have to wonder, does Washington and Rivera and that coaching staff look at him similar to maybe the Eagles looking at Jalen Reagor?
I think, Gibson is a little bit more polished as a running back. Obviously, Jalen is a guy who you can get the ball in space to, and that's when we talk about that. I'm fairly certain, though, that Gibson has been getting a lot of running back reps in practice. I think they're really trying to groom him into being more so of that. And so, you got Adrian Peterson, who still gets the job done. He's not what he was, years ago, but the man's enormous, and he can still move the chains. Bryce Love is a running back that a lot of people liked He got the injury, but now he's back, and they figure he's a big back who can do some things. You're right. It's not. Don't they have Peyton Barber as well? Who
yes, they do have
sort
Peyton
of held down
Barber.
the fort?
I slipped my mind because I was kind of wondering when I saw his name yesterday. I'm like, when did he sign with Washington? I feel like I missed that news item, but
yeah, I think it's kind of like sneaky decent. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not going to wow you with anyone. They've got no 3-down back right now, but they can hit you with some guys who have experience like Adrian and Peyton, and they can hit you with some guys who have some moves like McKissick and Antonio Gibson. Hey, look, Eagles fans should just be happy Chris Thompson's not on the team anymore because he used to kill them.
He's Geoff Mosher. Inside the Birds podcast drops tomorrow morning. You can check it out. Subscribe, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you get your podcast. Inside the Birds, the podcast, also InsideTheBirds.com, brand new look. And Geoff Mosher joins us every Monday and Wednesday here for Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Follow Geoff on Twitter at Geoff Mosher NFL. Geoff, always enjoy talking to you, and good luck with that projection.
Thanks, Josh. I'm sure everybody will have a fun time trying to listen to us figure it all out.
Again, Inside the Birds podcast will drop tomorrow morning. Make sure you subscribe, download it, do whatever you do with Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. Must listen Adam Kaplan tomorrow, Football at 4, here on 97.3 ESPN. Being brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now and they'll match your first deposit up to $250. Go to PlaySugarHouse.com and win real money with their sportsbook along with casino games from the comfort of your home. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.